Hi, quick, Nick Namalita, and this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian, and today we'll be talking about my September wrap-up. So this one is also late. Hopefully by now my August wrap-up is up. Sorry for the tardiness. I had it in my mind that I wanted, for some reason, I want to be able to wrap up the month with the wrap-ups. And so any vlogs that are lingering, I need to push out. So hopefully by now the August wrap-up is up. I don't like the aesthetic of a wrap-up next to a wrap-up. That's probably going to be how it's going to be. Whatever. So, I don't know if you care. I care, but... So, for the month of September, I remember it being a bit chaotic. I feel like I say that. I know it was only a couple weeks away, but it's October now. That's the past. Whatever. No, it was a whirlwind. So I'm surprised that I was able to read 9 books. I did heavily rely on audiobooks, which, I mean, I feel like is becoming old hat at this point in terms of getting reading done, which is perfectly fine with me. So for the month of September, I read, like I said, 9 books, which was 2,509 pages and 64.96 hours listened to. In terms of sources, 7 audiobooks, 2 physical formats. All of them were novels. Audience, 5 were adult, 2 were middle grade, 1 new adult, and 1 YA. And then in terms of genres, there's 2 fantasy, 1 historical, 1 horror, 2 memoirs. I guess I have it as a memoir and a nonfiction, which, I mean, I guess 1 romance and 2 thrillers. And then my rating breakdown. Please note that the 2 nonfictions, they're both somewhat memoirs, so I didn't end up rating them. 0 1 stars, 0 2 stars, 2 2.5 stars, 1 3 star, 3 3.5 stars, 0 4 stars, and 1 4.5 stars. There were no 5 stars this month, and then which make my average rating for the month of September a 3.29. So not too bad. Let's go ahead and get into the books that I read for the month. The first one being Garlic and the Witch by Brie Paulson. This is the second book in the Garlic and the Witch or Garlic and the Vampire series. I think it's just called the Garlic series by Brie Paulson. The first one is Garlic and the Vampire, where we follow Garlic, who's a little animated garlic bulb that helps in a witch's garden along with a bunch of other vegetables. Ends up volunteering or basically to check out a haunted house that now looks like it has someone in it. So Garlic goes to go check it out. That's the first one. And the second one, there seems to be something going on with the vegetable people, and that's kind of just the subplot. They're not entirely sure what's going on, but they're ignoring it for the time being and seeing what happens if it happens. And basically going to the Garlic is now on another adventure to go find a special ingredient for the witch. So yeah, I think these are cute. I think they're a good message for overcoming fears and trying something new and seeing new places. I really enjoyed them and meeting new people, in fact. So I would say that the first one is a bit cuter, in my opinion, than the second one. But otherwise, I think they're both relatively adorable and perfect for this fall season. The next one I ended up reading was one of the memoirs, and that is Broken in the Best Possible Way by Jenny Lawson. I absolutely love this cover style, and actually I had bought this a while ago and then read a different Jenny Lawson book, the one with the stuffed rat on it, and was really nervous about going into this one because I wasn't entirely sold on her writing after reading her first one, particularly her narration style. I found her voice a little grating and a little much for me. But then Broken was available through Libby, and I decided, okay, let's go ahead and give it a shot. And I actually really enjoyed it. I particularly remember the one with the stuffed rat being on the cover, being about her childhood and how that has affected her day-to-day life today. And then this one is more about her mental health, about her chronic illnesses, and navigating through the healthcare system and health insurance. So that one I particularly really felt for, and understand it to be a huge issue within the United States as a whole. So that it particularly is what stuck out to me in this one. I know there were some other shenanigans that she gets up to, as she always does. There are some like little rambly bits in there, which I feel like is just Jenny Lawson being Jenny Lawson. But it was cool to also note that she has a bookstore in Texas, and that she does like book boxes or like book clubs that she then sends to people, because like the Broken is was written around the time of the start of the pandemic, and so she thinks this is the perfect way to be able to connect people without having to be in person with people, because that's typically how she prefers to do it. So I thought that was really cool, and I actually checked it out for a little bit and liked the idea of it, but so far I don't know, I'm already questioning my subscription to Book of the Month, and no other book box so far has really intrigued me, because I can kind of guess what the book is, and I am not that interested, so I don't know. But it was really fun, particularly when she was talking about this cover, because the cover artist, Omar Ryan, my apologies if I'm saying that wrong, actually created this artwork, and that's what she was inspired by, because she ended up taking a look at this art, not to ruin it for you, but this is like, she compares this to holding on to chronic illness or mental health, and so she wanted it for her artwork, for her book cover. And so I thought originally that she just found someone to imitate that work, and no, Omar Ryan is the one that did it, so that was really cool. So, and it made me fall in love with his work, because I've seen it before and I absolutely love it, and I like the idea of having this artwork that is very much inspired by like the old masters, but having this like pop surrealist twist to it. Next, I ended up reading another Alice Feeney. I read Alice Feeney at the beginning of this year, back in January. I read Daisy Darker and absolutely loved it, and have been curious about Alice Feeney's other work, so I picked up Rock, Paper, Scissors. When this first originally came out, for some reason I was just like not interested. The way people were trying to sell it, I was just like, nah, I'm not, no. Like, I don't know why, and I don't know if it was because what the cover was giving or because of how people were selling it, but I thought it was like, I thought it was different from what it actually was somehow. We are following a married couple. The husband has face blindness, so he doesn't even recognize his own wife, and basically they won a giveaway to this church turned room for rent, not room for rent, this church turned guest house in the middle of nowhere, Scotland. And let's see, the couple is basically on its last leg of its marriage. This giveaway is supposed to be like the last push to really make sure if this marriage works or not. They're both kind of lying to each other, there's secrets being held, and there's something else going on. It turns out that this giveaway wasn't all that it seems, and they are now trapped up in a snowstorm in this church turned guest house with no contact to the outside world. So it seems a lot more sinister than it kind of is. I don't want to give anything away, but I ultimately really enjoyed this. I gave this 4.5 stars. I'm realizing I really enjoy Alice Feeney's work. Don't mind my cat's meowing outside the door if it sounds like she's dying. She probably just wants outside. So, like I said, really enjoyed this. I kept trying to guess where this was going to go and was completely wrong. And so when I did finally come to the reveals, I was really shocked and surprised. And oddly, just like, it was just really cool that the author was able to do that. I really do enjoy Alice Feeney's work. So yeah, I thought this was really fun, and like I love the twists and turns that she's able to do and surprise me with. So the next book that I read was actually on, I think, my August TBR, and I didn't end up getting to it, but I did still want to read it, and that was The Curse of the Boyfriend Sweater, Essays on Crafting by Alana Okun. This one was really interesting, and it's more like a memoir, even though it says essays on crafting. Even though it says essays on crafting, Alana Okun kind of goes into she does very much go into her life growing up, how her grandma taught her how to knit, how she's dealt with mental health in terms of crafting in some way or another, usually with knitting or crocheting. And how she's met other people through crafting, and yeah, kind of the stigmas that happen with crafting, or with knitting in particular, how people think it's like an old people thing to do, or like, you know, some of the ways it's represented in movies, and how actually people don't actually knit that way. So I thought it was a really fun book, and then ultimately, like, because I have been in the middle of a knitting project, it made me, like, as I was listening to it, I was knitting, and I really enjoyed it. So, and I think it was a really interesting look on Alana Okun's mental health, and how she kind of also goes into how she's always kind of needed someone, but there's that old wives' tale about not knitting a sweater for your boyfriend because you'll break up before the last stitch, and how Alana has navigated that, whether it was she kept trying to create stuff for the boyfriends that she's had. So it was interesting. That's mostly what sticks out to me, particularly with her relationship with her sister as well, who also has mental health issues, and it's also a crafter, but in a different way, and that I can also relate to, as like my families are big into crafting one way or another, and just big into art. So yeah, and use it as coping mechanisms. So yeah, I thought it was really fun and interesting, and I'm just happy that I read it. So I'm always interested to see if I actually want a physical copy. I can see myself like getting one just to be able to reread later, but I actually am just wondering if I just want to reread by listening to it again, because ultimately it is a fun one to listen to as I knit. It was very similar to like in a way, listening to like Pardon My Stash, of just like being inspired to create something as I'm creating something, if that makes sense. So I don't necessarily know if I need a physical copy. I've been in this mentality that my physical copies are more like my book trophies of books that I finish one way or another, whether it's through listening or through reading physically. But lately I've been thinking like, actually, I don't need them. I'm kind of letting that go. Depending on what it is. I do want rock, paper, scissors though. The next book I ended up reading was Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez. This is a book. This was also available as an audiobook through Libby, and also my book of the month read. So I try to read a book of the month a month, and it's not always great. I don't always get there. So, but I was able to read this one, Take My Hand. And basically we are following a nurse. We have two timelines. We have present day, I think it was set in 2018, and then we flip back to 1973, in Montgomery, Alabama. Our main character is Sybil Townsend, and she is a nurse, and recently got hired into a family planning clinic and is charged with a couple of girls that she's supposed to be giving birth control to. But she starts questioning things about the clinic, particularly when she realizes that one of the girls isn't even bleeding yet, and so in her mind shouldn't be receiving birth control, and then the other girl has been bleeding and has been bleeding consistently since receiving the birth control shots, but doesn't see any boys. Like, she's not sexually active. She's only like 11 or 12 or something like that. And so the nurse really starts questioning, or Sybil really starts questioning, like, what's going on in this family planning clinic, particularly as things start to progress and she stops giving them birth control only for something even worse to happen. This was fairly intense, and I would say look up content warnings before getting into it. My main problem, I thought it was very interesting in terms of, yes, there were, and I don't know if there continues to be, I'm sure there are, it's just under the radar, but experiments happening on BIPOC people through the medical field. Hence the hesitation and distrust with BIPOC folks, with a lot of BIPOC folks in the medical field, particularly when we saw during the pandemic when the vaccine came out, there was a lot of hesitation. So like with this one, it's as well as taking advantage of folks who are illiterate and don't understand fully what's going on, particularly when the healthcare workers are not giving full information. So it really takes a look at regulations. So I thought that was really interesting. It also reflects on, I think, other experiments that happened. Definite content warnings. I think I had a couple of issues with this in terms of, one, when they were talking about and how many women it was affecting, or the type of women it was affecting, like poor white women, black women, Latina women. They left out Indigenous women, which did also happen. I think that's something that just kind of bugs the heck out of me every time, in terms of like, okay, if you're gonna list all the women that it's affecting, list all the women, quit erasing Indigenous voices. My also problem with this is that really, like, it kind of made it that it was like supposed to be around these girls that were affected by this, but really we got the guilt and sympathy of the nurse instead. It very much became about her, not the girls. Dolan Perkins Valdez wanted to give the perspective of the nurses in terms of how bad they felt or what they did to try to help it, bring it out. But I feel like that's taking away from the victims, particularly with this character. And that was going back through to ultimately meet up with these girls years and years later, but still holds this guilt, and it's still making it about her. So I don't know. I had issue with it, but at the same time, I think it has important messages. What did I rate this? I rated this 3 stars. Next, I ended up reading Angelica Frankenstein Makes Her Match, and this is by Sally Thorne. So this was another one that was it available through Libby? Or did I think it was available through Libby. I don't think I purchased it. As you can tell, I heavily relied on my library, which is great. So this is my first Sally Thorne. I know she also wrote The Hating Game. I haven't read it. But this was also narrated by Moira Quirk. And this is basically a historical fiction. We are following the Frankenstein siblings, Victor Frankenstein and Angelica Frankenstein. I think this is supposed to be like new adult. But it kind of read like a YA in a way. So we are following Victor and Angelica. Angelica is Victor's assistant, and of the sorts is also his sister, as he is trying to, create life from death. But he's also trying to help his sister, and because she needs to be courted, she needs to be married off, because he is betrothed and is about to get married to the love of his life, and and his sister ultimately doesn't want to be, the spinster that's living with him, that turns nanny, that turns, basically she doesn't want to be single. But everyone in town feels that the Frankenstein siblings are oddities. Well, Victor is like a genius of his time, etc. But because of the time, Angelica is just kind of seen as not a good match, in terms of she seems a little weird. She seems very outspoken, which is a big no-no. And she's very independent, which is also a big no-no. So to combat this, to be able to not be single anymore, Victor and Angelica decide to make her a man. Um, it's kind of, it's odd. And basically they create two monsters. There is Victor Frankenstein's monster, who immediately runs off, and then there is Angelica Frankenstein's monster, and who she is trying to convince to love her. However, he still, even though he has lost his memories of what his life was before, he still retains something there. He's trying to figure it out, and ultimately he wants to know who he was before he can start living in the now. And so Angelica helps him to do that. And throughout it has like these interesting messages in terms of Angelica is actually in a very privileged position. So it's like it's kind of taking a look at her and going, what are you doing with the privilege that you have? And at one point there does become this sort of love triangle, as she does end up finding someone while in search of her monster's past. It's all very interesting. I thought it was interesting, and particularly I ended up listening to this while Brad was out hunting, so there was that like lonely aspect of it. So anytime I felt for Angelica, anytime she felt like she wasn't loved. Not to say that I don't feel loved, there was just this moment of loneliness that I had, that I connected with her while Brad was out on his hunting trip. So it was just something that I felt like I kind of needed at the time. Again, not to say that I'm not loved, but it was just something that I kind of connected with, and I liked the emotion of it. But like I said, I kind of like read like a young adult, but then there were sex scenes, so it felt a little weird. And I'm wondering if this is this the trend that like folks are talking about, like we shouldn't be navigating YA books to fit adult needs. But at the same time, I don't know. It was odd. I don't think I will be getting a physical copy of this despite enjoying it. Mostly because there's a hard connect for me when it comes to some of the sex scenes, particularly with her monster that with like dead flesh that weirds me out. But also I'm not a fan of the cover whatsoever. I don't know if there's alternate covers, but I don't know. I thought it was relatively interesting. It was, and I don't think I would have picked it up otherwise if it wasn't available on Libby. So next I ended up doing a reread, which is like almost unheard of for me, but that is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, collected from Folklore and retold by Alvin Schwartz, with drawings by Stephen Gamble. This one I haven't read in like years. So I remember picking this up when I was in elementary school and like being scared shitless by Stephen Gamble's illustrations. Like, so, and I felt like this one, I think I finished like towards the end of September. I can't quite recall, but it was like a week or so. I think it was like a week or so just before banned books week, so I thought it was like perfect, mostly because I didn't know that this was a banned book. It doesn't hold up. I will say that. There was like a nostalgia factor for me in remembering the illustrations and being freaked out by them. There was a couple of stories that I'm like, yeah, okay, that kind of, I can see that, for like being a little nerve-wracking. Otherwise it was just kind of, it was okay. Like I said, it was more of a nostalgia factor than anything else. This is a banned book or challenge book because of, I believe, like violent content, as well as, I don't know, some other random stuff. But I thought it was interesting. I think I only gave it a 2-star though, because I'm just like, it really doesn't hold up for me. But I'm also not the target audience. Like I said, I remember reading it as a kid and just being really freaked out by it. So the next book I was actually also surprised to have read, and that's because it was also available through my library, and that is Gallant by V.E. Schwab, narrated by Julian Reintut. So, okay, I wonder. So I know that this one has like it's, people have said it's not as good as, like, because it came out right after The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and that one was such a huge hit that when Gallant came out, it was kind of a letdown. I haven't read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I have it. And Victoria Schwab seems to be one of those authors that, like, I have kind of, like, gathered up some of her work, but I haven't read all of them yet. So, like, I still need to finish up the Cassidy Blake series. I have one more to go. But after reading the Monsters of Verity series, like 2/3 of the Cassidy Blake series, and now Gallant, all I can say is that Victoria Schwab has, for me, is an author that has a really interesting and dark premise, but her writing is sorely lacking. It's very lackluster. So Gallant, we are following a young girl who is mute, who is in a girls' school. She was dropped off, or, like, I don't know if it's an orphanage, but it's an all-girls housing thing, school of sorts. Was dropped off there very, very young. She doesn't really remember her mother, and all she has to go on is her mother's notebook, where a lot of it ends up getting real weird. Like, her mother's not quite all there, and right as I think it's an orphanage of sorts, because, like, right as she's about to get aged out and either sold to a workforce or, like, sold to a to a man, a letter ends up coming from her uncle, who calls her to Gallant, even though in her mother's notebook it says you'll be fine so long as you don't go to Gallant. However, she wants to go somewhere, so she, like, that's not this place. So she ends up getting driven to Gallant, where there are odd things happening. She saw ghouls at the school, but now she sees particularly a lot of ghouls at Gallant, and Gallant is now run by her cousin. He doesn't want her there. He's trying to send her back, and that immediately to her makes her feel on edge with him. There's, like, another world that they're trying to keep at bay, and it's all, like, kind of, like, dark and mysterious, but ultimately it was very lackluster. So I think it's a gorgeous cover, but that's pretty much it. Like, it was just okay. It's not something, like, I barely remember it, in all honesty. Like, it's hard to figure out. It's hard to tell you, like, what it's about. I remember bits and pieces of it, but without giving it away. Like, oh, I ended up reading 2 book of the months this month. Fantastic. So the next book that I ended up reading was What Lies in the Woods by Kate Ellis Marshall. This one I had on hold through Libby for the longest time, and it finally came through, so I ended up listening to it. I would say content warning before going into this one as well, if you're all at all interested. But basically, there are 3 girls that were playing in the woods, and suddenly one gets attacked and ends up in the hospital. She almost ends up dying, and ends up sending a man to jail, or to prison, only for years later the man dies in prison, and she's starting to question if she sent the right one to prison, the person who attacked her. So we are following, what's her name, Naomi Shaw, as she kind of, like, goes back to the town years later after being attacked, and, like, reconnects with friends and family, and is trying to remember, like, because there is a podcaster that is kind of digging into the past of this, and she realizes that she doesn't have all the answers that she thought she did, and starts to try to piece things back together. This was another one that ended up hitting emotionally a couple of times, but at the same time, it ended up hitting emotionally a couple of times, mostly because I felt for Naomi in terms of in a couple different aspects. Was a bit nervous because she does, like, anytime alcohol is involved, I'm worried that they're going to self-medicate, as well as with pills, as we so often see in some thriller books, particularly when it comes to true crime. But this one wasn't like that. She does kind of self-medicate with alcohol, just alcohol. But I thought it was interesting in terms of the twists in here. I don't know, it was also kind of over dramatic in a way. I'm not like, it was interesting, and I'm glad that I read it, but could I say that I would read it again? Probably not. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to everybody. So I enjoyed the nostalgia of it in terms of, because Naomi ends up, there's like flashbacks of when Naomi was a kid with her two friends and out in the woods and the games that they would play. And so there was that aspect that I thought was really nice and made a connection better with her friends. But at the same time, like, there's obviously more of a connection with one friend than the other. I don't know. And I don't know. I didn't necessarily predict what was going to happen, but it wasn't surprising when the twist ended up coming. I think I also just contradicted myself what I just said. So, like, it surprised me, but it was also not surprising, if that makes any sense. And it was a little over dramatic, and ultimately it just kind of let me down, like the folks did in here for Naomi. So, like, it was just kind of like, man, humanity kind of sucks. So, which I get, I'm very much aware of. I think all of us are. So it was just kind of like, that was kind of a downer. So, anyway. So those were the books that I read for the month of September. If you've read any of them, please let me know your thoughts down in the description or down in the comments down below. I'd be very much interested in hearing them. Yeah. If you made it this far, let's go ahead and put, I'm just seeing Jenny Lawson's like thing, so let's do your favorite flower emoji. And I hope that you are in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading, and I will see you hopefully in another video very soon. Cheers.